Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Let me introduce our second group. The theme is Period of Literature. My name is Helmi Casmi, and my group partner is Syifa Fadliila. Let's discuss the period of British literature first. The first period is Old English or Anglo-Saxon period. Since 450 until 1066, it comes from two Germanic tribes. It is the Angles and the Saxons. It dates back to their invasion, along with the Jutes, of Celtic England circa around 450. The era ends in 1066 when Norman France, under William as a government, that conquered England. A lot of the prose during this time was a translation of something else, or otherwise legal, medical, or religious in nature. The next period is Middle English period, since 1066 until 1500. The Middle English period sees a huge transition in the language, culture, and lifestyle of England, and result in what we can recognize now as a form of modern English. As with the Old English period, much of the Middle English writings were religious. The next period is Renaissance. Since 1500 until 1660. Recently, critics and literary historians have begun to call this is the early modern period, but here we retain the historically familiar term is Renaissance. It's subdivided into four parts, including the Elizabethan period from 1558 until 1603, the Jacobin period from 1603 until 1625, the Caroline period from 1625 until 1649, and the Commonwealth period from 1649 until 1660. The Elizabethan period was the golden age of English drama. The notable writers of this period include John Donne, Shakespeare, Michael Drayton, John Webster, Elizabeth Carey, Ben Jonson, and Lady Mary Ward. Finally, this is the time when Oliver Cromwell, as a Puritan, who led the parliament that ruled the nation. The next period is Neoclassical period, since 1660 until 1785. This period is also subdivided into ages. The Restoration period from 1660 until 1700. The Augustan period from 1700 until 1745, and the Sensibility period from 1745 until 1785. The Restoration period sees some response to the puritanical age, especially in the theater. The Augustan period was a time of Alexander Pope and Jonathan Swift, who imitate those first Augustans and even drew parallels between themselves and the first set. The Sensibility period, sometimes referred to as the Johnson period, was the time Edmund Burke, Edward Gibbon, Hester Lynch, Trill, James Boswell, and of course Samuel Johnson as the notable writers. Ideas such as neoclassicism is a critical and literary mode, and the Enlightenment as a particular worldview shared by many intellectuals were championed during this age. The next period is the Romantic period. Since 1785 until 1832, the beginning date for the Romantic period is often debated. Some claim it is in 1785, immediately following the Sensibility period. Others say it began in 1789 with the start of the French Revolution, and still others believe that in 1798, the publication year for William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge book Lyrical Ballads is its true beginning. The time period ends with the passage of the Reform Bill and with the death of Sir Walter Scott. The notable writers for this period include Meadow Lewis, Anne Radcliffe, and William Beckford. The next period is Victorian period, since 1832 until 1901. This period is named for the reign of Queen Victoria, who ascended to the throne in 1837, and it lasts until her death in 1901. It was a time of great social, religious, intellectual, and economic issues heralded by the passage of the Reform Bill, which expanded voting rights. The Victorian period is in strong contention with the Romantic period for being the most popular, influential, and prolific period in all of English literature. The next period is the Edwardian period, since 1901 until 1914. This period is named of King Edward VII and covers the period between Victoria's death and the outbreak of World War I. Although a short period and a short reign for Edward VII, the era includes incredible classic novelists. The next period is Georgian period, since 1910 until 1936. The Georgian period is usually refers to the reign of George V from 1910 until 1936, but sometimes also include the reign of the four successive Georges from 1714 until 1830. This Georgian poetry is typically considered to be the works of minor poets and anthologized by Edward Marsh. The theme and subject matter tended to be rural or pastoral in nature, treated delicately and traditionally rather than with the passion or with the experimentation. The next period is the modern period in 1914. The modern period traditionally applies to works written after the start of World War I. Common features include bold experimentation with the subject matter, style, and form, encompassing narrative, verse, and drama. New criticism also appeared at this time, led by the likes of Woolf, Eliot, William Emerson, and others, which reinvigorated literary criticism in general. It is difficult to say whether modernism has ended, though we know that postmodernism has developed after and from it. for now, and the genre remains ongoing. And the last period is the postmodern period in 1945. This period begins about the time that World War II ended. Many believe it is a direct response to modernism. Some say that the period ended by about 1990, but it's like but it is likely too soon to declare this period closed. Post-structuralist literally theory and criticism developed during this time. Some notable writers of this period include Samuel Beckett, Joseph Heller, Anthony Burgess, John Fowles, Penelope M. Lively, and Ian Banks. Many postmodern authors wrote during the modern period as well. Okay, well, the next period of the American literature will discuss with my group partner Syifa Fadliila. Syifa Fadliila, this is your turn.
Okay, thank you, Jasmine. Well, we will discuss about periods of American literature. First is the colonial period, 1607 to 1775. This period encompasses the founding of Jamestown up to a decade before the Revolutionary War. The writings of this time centered on religious, practical, or historical themes. The most influential writers of the colonial period include John Winthrop, Cotton Mather, Benjamin Franklin, and Anne Bradstreet. The second is the Revolutionary Age, 1765 to 1790. Beginning a decade before the Revolutionary War and ending about 25 years later, this period includes the writing of Thomas Jefferson, Thomas Paine, James Madison, and Alexander Hamilton. Important works include the Declaration of Independence, the Federalist Papers, and the poetry of Joel Barlow and Philip Freneau. Next is the early national period, 1775 to 1828. The writers of this new American literature wrote in the English style, but the settings, themes, and characters were authentically American. Three of the most recognized writers of this time are Washington Irving, James Fenimore Cooper, and Edgar Allan Poe. The first American comedy was written for the stage, The Contrast, by Royal Taylor, written in 1787. The first American novel, The Power of Sympathy, by William Hill, written in 1789. The next is the American Renaissance, also known as the Romantic period in America and the Age of Transcendentalism. This period is commonly accepted to be the greatest of American literature. The writers of this period produced work of originality and excellence that helped shape the ideas, ideals, and literary aims of many American writers. Writers of the American Romantic period include Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, Edgar Allan Poe, Herman Melville, Nathaniel Hawthorne, Harriet Beecher Stowe, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, Emily Dickinson, and Walt Whitman. The next is the realistic period. The major form of literature produced in this era was realistic fiction. Unlike romantic fiction, realistic fiction aims to represent life as it really is and make the reader believe that the characters actually might exist and the situations might actually happen. The major writers of the realistic period include Mark Twain, Henry James, Bret Harte, and Kate Chopin. The next is the naturalist period. Naturalist claims to give an even more accurate depiction of life than realism. In accordance with a post-Darwinian thesis, naturalistic writers hold that the characters of their work are merely higher order animals whose character and behavior is entirely based upon heredity and environment. Naturalistic writings try to present subjects with scientific objectivity. These writings are often frank, crude, and tragic. Stephen Crane, Jack London, and Theodore Dreiser are the most studied American naturalists. The next is the modern period. The American modernists experiment with the subject matter, form, and style and produce achievement in all literary genres. The American modernist period produced many other writers that are considered to be writers of modernist period subclasses. For example, F. Scott Fitzgerald is considered a writer of the Jazz Age. Langston Hughes and W.E.B. Du Bois, writers of the Harlem Renaissance, and Gertrude Stein, T.S. Eliot, Ezra Pound, and Ernest Hemingway, writers of the Lost Generation. The Great Depression marked the end of the American modernist period. The next is, and the last, the contemporary period. This period includes an abundance of important American literary figures spanning from World War II into the new millennium. These writers include but are not limited to Eudora Welty, John Updike, Kurt Vonnegut, Sylvia Plath, Arthur Miller, Tennessee Williams, Rob Ellison, Gwendolyn Brooks, Ura Neale Hurston, Alice Walker, Toni Morrison, and Maya Angelou. During the 1950s, a vigorous anti-establishment and anti-traditional literary movement emerged. The main writers of this movement, Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac, are called beat writers. Much writing of the 1960 and 1970 referred to as counterculture writing, continued the literary ideals of the beat movement, but in a more extreme and favored manner. Currently, the contemporary American literary scene is crowded and varied. With the passage of time, the contemporary period may be reorganized and or expanded. Thank you for your attention and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.